Değil. Değil. Yok değil. Getirebilirseniz memnun olurum. Kıymetli katılımcılar, hoş geldiniz.
Dear guests, we would like to welcome you to our session. Before I start with my first speech, I would like to invite the panelists to the floor. From the EU delegation for Turkey, Christian Balaro. Next, we have Dilan Kavruk.
And Mark Leborn from World Bank, and Sibel Gülen from World Bank, and Luca Barbetti from IMDC. No, not this one. Değerli katılımcılar, Marmara Denizi.
Dear guests, we have our panel here. I would like to welcome you to our panel of wind energy in the Marmara Sea, opportunities and partnerships. And we see that renewable energies are getting more important with each year, and the offshore potential of the Marmara Sea is one of the foremost regions in Turkey, and to use up this potential and to have a supply security will help with our sustainable energy. And these studies and works we are using on the Marmara Sea offshore wind farms and the sectoral changes, and for the evaluation, what will be the best strategies for Turkey will be evaluated here in this panel. I would like to thank you for your participation, and I hope for a fruitful start. And we will start with Dr. Dilan Kavruk. She comes from the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and she's the head of the YEKA department for the General Directorate of Energy Affairs. And Ms. Kavruk, you have the floor. I would like to welcome you, and I would like to thank the TWEC team and all of the companies who are supporting this conference here, and I hope we will have a fruitful position here. I will talk about the studies we are working as the ministry on offshore, and for details I would leave the floor to our other panelists. Let's start as follows. Our studies, our works for offshore didn't start new. We started in 2018 with a tender for offshore wind farms as the ministry, and in 2018 we had a tender for a 1200 megawatt system, and all of the oceanographical and meteorological data has been collected, and the analysis of the seabed, seafloor, and what are the limitations, and everything was left to the investor. We decided on a price, and we expected to open this tender, and we expected to give this to the company with the best price. But there was not much interest, and a couple of companies who were interested were undecided to apply for a tender or not, and at the last second they decided not to participate in the tender. So there was a couple of parameters, and there were no measurements done, like meteorological or oceanographical, or not the measurement of the seafloor. And this led to the investors to stand back and not apply for this tender, because this would mean that they would put all of these risks into their price, and the investor didn't want to take this risk. So as the ministry, we decided to make these measurements and these analysis and make it as a ministry and give the data to the companies who wanted to apply. So this project study I will present today is one of these. So there will also be other projects, and this is the latest one I'm talking about right now. So I would like to give you the general energy perspective. You know, we have a established power of 114 gigawatts, and if we put all of our resources together, we have a 114, and 67.4 gigawatt contains renewable energies like hydroelectric, biomass, wind energy, solar energy, and this is a renewable energy of 59%. So 59% of our established power production, it comes from renewable energies. So to increase the amount of renewable energies, we have set big goals to increase this 67.4 gigawatts to 120. Only solar and wind will be 120 gigawatts. This is a very promising goal. So in 2019, we decided to increase the installed capacity of 95.9 gigawatts to almost 190, and the amount or the ratio of renewable energies from 52 to 64%. So we plan on having the offshore wind farms from 0 to 5 gigawatts, and hydroelectric from 31 to 35, and biomass from 3.1 to 5.1, and nuclear energy should be increased from 0 gigawatts to, let me check, I cannot see it on my screen. Yes, 5.9. So we planned to increase the resources we already have and start new resources. So the offshore wind farms have an important role here because they will be a first for our country. And we have a great potential in Turkey, and this wind potential on sea and on land has to be evaluated, and we wanted to start with the Marmara Sea. Why offshore? Because there are less topographical obstacles on sea, because we don't have hills, because it's a flat surface. So we can use also big turbines, which are more efficient, and the environmental impact is less, and sound pollution is also not an issue, and you can use it also as a base station because it's a stable wind you have offshore, and the offshore areas in Turkey are close to industrial production areas. This is one of the most important reasons why we started on the Marmara Sea, is because we have a lot of industry here, so the losses during transportation of energy will be less. And in regards of our national action plan, until 2035, we are planning to reach 5 gigawatts. And for the Aegean Sea and Marmara Sea, we have a great wind potential. And in the Aegean Sea, we have a more wind potential. But because the Marmara Sea is a internal sea, it's easier to set up the procedures. So that's why we wanted to start with the Marmara Sea. And it's also close to the industry. Of course, we need legislation. We needed legislation for that. So with this legislation, which has been revised, is renewed, and we can have with this an infrastructure we planned for 5 to 6 years ago. And we have 3 areas on the Marmara Sea, and we had a cooperation. We have a cooperation with the World Bank, and we started in these 3 areas to work on the wind farms. And Şarköy is the smallest area, is the first number 1. And the middle one is the area number 2, and the biggest area is number 3. So Karabiga is the middle one, and the biggest one is the Bandırma offshore wind farm. So for these 3 areas, we did meteorological and oceanographical measurements and to look for the legislation, start or design a new tender, and all of these studies and the feasibility report. This is our goal for the close next future. And GS02 is our next project, where we have an environmental and social analysis and to look for the migration routes of birds and the impact on biodiversity. So we did, after selecting the right area, we will do this geological analysis, and we'll start with our tender, a capacity tender. So after that, we will look at the amount of capacity and the area and prepare the tender for that. And in scope of the YEKA project, similar to the YEKA project, but this time we will be more clear with all of the analysis and with all the data. So this will be the next tender. This is how we plan this next tender. And in scope of this project, we will see the output of these studies. So let's look in detail to the areas. I don't want to bore you with too much details, but this is our most efficient area, which is also the smallest one. It's on the shore of Şarköy, and we have a wind speed here of 8.3 meters per second. Yes, it is a small area, but it's very efficient. So our goal is to find a place where we can produce the wind into energy the most efficiently. So, of course, the economy of scale is important here, but when we think of this as an initial project, then we see this area having an advantage because it has higher speeds. And if we look at the infrastructure, and if the infrastructure is also okay, then we might use this as the first area for our tender. But we have to wait for the data which will come from the analysis. So here in the second area, we have a mean wind speed of 6.7 meters per second, and the capacity has to be cleared up. And the third one is, okay, can you please make it a little quicker because we are short on time? So in the third area, we have a wind speed of 6.9 meters per second, and this is the Bandırma offshore wind farm. And the analysis to the project will start shortly and will be end also shortly. So What type of turbines are we going to use in these areas? So, in regards of these, the winds in our area will be the unit power between 8 and 15 megawatts, and the tower height will be between 100 and 150 meters. So, when we look at our candidates, our first criteria was the depth of the water. So, we decided to have a depth of maximum 50 meters because we don't want to go over to switch over to floating towers because of the price, of course. So we looked for areas where we have a depth of less than 50 meters. So we have a stable structure under the towers. So we will decide on the capacity and design a tender in regards to this. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ms. Kauruk. And we have to, of course, talk about what Jill Dixon talked about in the opening session. The elimination of risks in the areas, in the regions, is very important. So you have to do the preparation, and the areas must be ready for investment. So with this project, we are preparing the area for investment and clearing up all of the risk. This is our main goal. I would like to give the word next to Christine Ballaro from the EU delegation. And for the development of the areas is important for the EU, and our speaker will talk about this subject. This project it's been supported by the EU with a grant of the IPA. And why is the EU supporting us? Our speaker will talk about this.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Engin Bey. Thanks, colleagues, and thanks for having me. It's indeed, I have to say, a great pleasure because, and thanks for the very nice presentation already. It's thrilling to see how the EU money are really being used to produce something very concrete and very needed. And indeed, you just to give a bit of context why the EU is supporting that. As you know, the EU is helping Turkey through the instrument for pre-accession, which is even in the third phase of this cycle. This activity in particular was funded under the so-called IPA 2. Why? Because I think there are two elements. One is the sort of macro element, because indeed Turkey is approximating all the EU legislation and what we call the acquis communautaire in terms of policies and practices. But I believe there is also another more important element, that here we really see a common win-win ground where Turkey and the EU really share the same objectives. And in fact, on renewables in particular, there were already, and everybody can witness this incredible success that they have already implemented. Why it is important to really invest on renewables? Well, I will not repeat what you know very well. Certainly, we are now in a transitional moment. We are really trying to have this clean energy transition. That is why in the EU, as you know, we have launched first the European Green Deal, which put forward very ambitious objectives, even more ambitious in the recent policy packages of the so-called Fit for 55 and Repower EU. All this certainly has a clear dimension because we really want to mitigate climate change impacts. However, there is another dimension which is equally important, and what are the spillovers of this huge fight against climate change? Not by chance, the European Green Deal is an economic policy. It's not only a green policy for addressing climate change. And as you know, wind and offshore wind in particular, also for the EU, is a great priority. Currently, We have about 20 gigawatt installed, and we plan to reach 200 in a few years, which means that there is a huge push for investors to really look into this opportunity, which is an opportunity that, as we know, is going to create jobs. We projected that only for offshore we might reach at least from 25 to 50,000 jobs. But not only it has positive social benefit for the lives of citizens, better climate and jobs, but a huge business opportunity, which is also attached to the push on research and innovation. We have been witnessing these days how this offshore in particular is advancing quite quickly. And this is a great push also for innovation. Let's think about, for example, the current sort of fight between the gearboxes or direct drive. This is an important element which really pushes the whole value chain from, they're saying, from the design, from the university to really the value chains. If you want to have direct drive, then you need permanent magnets, and then you need to go and check your rare earth materials and so on. In fact, in the EU, all of this is framed around different strategies. We have this strategy for renewables. We have a specific offshore strategy. But these are also synergistic with other legislative acts. Recently, you know that we have this net zero industry and the raw materials strategy as well. All this, it's very complicated, but in a nutshell, why we are supporting wind? Yeah. Why we are supporting, I was about to wrap up. Why we are supporting wind is to really achieve systemic change. Systemic change that is meant to certainly bring jobs, business, but most importantly, benefit to the people. And on this pathway, I'm really glad that we are cooperating with World Bank in implementing and all the colleagues that are implementing the project, but also teaming up with you, you know very well IPA in fact, and really I look forward to seeing the first results and probably the first auctions, because that will be really the game changer that we are all looking forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Christian. Özellikle Christian'ın bu
In this presentation, Christian underlined the importance of the financial dimension of the Green Deal and also its positive effect on the technological development. And we will be making the value chain even more important. Now we are going to continue with Mark Laybourne from the World Bank, Offshore Wind Advisor. On the 7th and 8th November, we are going to be launching Turkey offshore roadmap preparation. He played a key role, and he also contributed hugely to EU offshore development. Now, we would like to ask Mark how he evaluates the potential in Marmara and the opportunities that he handles within the scope of the roadmap and the project. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been supporting Turkey to look at offshore wind under the World Bank's offshore wind program for the past 4 years. This is a major milestone this week. We are publishing the offshore wind roadmap for the country, which looks, and I'll give you some more information on that at the moment, as well as kicking off. So, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, this week is a big milestone for offshore wind in Turkey. On Thursday, we will be launching the offshore wind roadmap for Turkey, which we've been working on for the past few years with the ministry. It is one of 8 roadmaps that the World Bank has published so far on offshore wind. And Turkey is one of 26 countries that the World Bank has been supporting on offshore wind. So there's a lot of good experience coming together from around the world in establishing offshore wind. And this roadmap follows a fairly set outlay and looking at what the opportunities are for the country, both in terms of energy and the economy, helping to inform policy making and regulatory setting, but also looking at things like environmental and social issues, supply chain, grid and ports. So it's really helping to understand all the different elements you need to have in place to deliver offshore wind successfully. And we'll be publishing that on Thursday this week. So I encourage you to download that when it's available. Some of the key outcomes of the roadmap were to look at some of the spatial assessments of the country and the opportunity that is here for offshore wind. And it's identified over 60 gigawatts of offshore wind potential. A little closer, like this? Okay, no problem. So over 60 gigawatts of offshore wind potential across 4 broad areas. The roadmap also looks at different scenarios of how the offshore wind industry could grow in Turkey, with a high growth scenario delivering 7 gigawatts by 2040. That has helped to inform the ministry's targets of 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. It also provides a whole series of recommendations on a big range of subjects relating to offshore wind and what needs to be in place to deliver offshore wind successfully. So focusing on the next steps to go from where we are now with this sort of high-level analysis to actually getting towards tenders and then delivering offshore wind. I encourage you to look at that report when it comes out because there's over 200 pages of information in there. So it goes into a lot of detail into everything from the regulatory and policy issues to things like health and safety, environmental and social, even to sort of supply chain and ports. So there's a wealth of information in there to inform you. One of the key recommendations from the roadmap around the next steps was to try to reduce the risk to investors. This gives them the certainty to come into the country and invest the hundreds of millions of dollars that are required to do the development work, and then the billions of dollars required to actually deliver the projects. As we heard from Giles Dixon this morning, European countries have learned that in some cases the government leading that work to do that de-risking is really, really beneficial. It can help bring those investors in and drive down the cost of electricity, and it's great to see Turkey doing that, as Engin Bey was mentioning. So we have this EU-Turkey offshore wind support project, which is kicking off this week, as Christian was mentioning, looking at these 3 areas across the Sea of Marmara, which cover about 1,600 square kilometers of sea space. There's a lot of potential there, but there's a lot to understand about the wind conditions, the seabed conditions, the environmental and social issues that are going to be faced, as well as grid and ports, and then thinking about the tender design to actually bring in those investors and secure those projects. That work is being generously funded by the EU, being administered by the World Bank and implemented by the ministry. We have Luca from IMDC, who's going to speak after me, leading some of the Met Ocean and wind assessment work. We have the team from Tetra Tech, who are leading some of the work on environmental and social issues. And also as part of that support work will be assessments and analysis of the seabed as well, and that will be procured later into the project. So there's a lot of different parties coming together into this to help provide that information and give the certainty that is needed to inform tenders in the future for offshore wind. I'll hand back to Engin Bey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I won't interrupt further. And now I would like to give the floor to Luca from IMDC. They are carrying out the studies in terms of these Met Ocean measurements. Luca, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yes, I think I would like to introduce shortly the project that we have started the beginning of September. So it's a project where we are working together with our partners, USense, Aker Ocean, and Engie Impact. We are mainly producing, let's say, here it's the division of tasks. We are mainly focusing on the 3 areas that the ministers has mentioned, area 1, 2, and 3 in the Marmara Sea. Basically, the first one of the main tasks is indeed collecting meteocean data, so wind, waves, currents data from this location. We are mobilizing at this. We are mobilizing at this moment 2 floating lidars. Okay, 2 floating lidars that will be deployed, let's say, beginning of next year. They will take measurement on wind, waves, and currents for 1 year. In parallel, we are also starting collecting available information, available data on the site. So this will be part of task 2, where actually we will do the full technical, economical, financial, and legal feasibility study. So this, we actually, at the end of this project, will be able to select the preferred site with the highest potential in wind energy resource assessment, but also from the economical and legal aspect. So these, they are the 2 main tasks. Next to this, we will also support the ministry with preparing the 3rd main contract on the ground investigation. So we'll prepare all the tender documentation and the different, to do marine investigations, so to collect geophysical and geotechnical data on the preferred site. And yeah, we'll also look very important on the grid connection study. So how we can connect this offshore wind farms site to the onshore, because this will also be critical, let's say, for a project developer perspective, to be sure that they can bring energy to land, let's say. Speaking shortly about the consortium, so IMDC is in partnership indeed with USense, Accretion, and Energy Impact. IMDC will mainly take the lead on the marine aspects, so anything about below water level, let's say, also looking at the different assets of an offshore wind farm. USense will mainly look at the wind energy potential. Also, they will install 3 met masts onshore near the offshore wind site to calibrate and validate, let's say, the offshore measurement. Accretion will provide, mobilize, and maintain the 2 floating lidars that will collect indeed very important and bankable data for the project developers on wind, waves, current, and any other of oceanographic measurements. And Energy Impact will mainly focus on the grid connection study, so looking at how to connect the grid and the financial assessment. And then we are also indeed working with other subcontractors like Ergun Law Office, which they will mainly focus on the legal aspects, so do a full review of the legislation in Turkey about offshore wind and how we can improve this if there are any data gaps that we can make. And then we'll have Tractable and Germany looking at the financial model, and the University of Istanbul, Technical University of Istanbul, with the Professor Kabir, that will mainly support on collecting the site data, so anything that is already available on the site and the Marmara Sea that could be very useful to be integrated in our study. So we speak about seismic service, geophysical bathymetry service, other type of very important information. Yeah, I will not go maybe through the organization chart, but indeed, yeah, there are several experts that will form, let's say, the core team of the project, let's say, is a mix of international and more local expert. So this is also like a winning way how to develop this project. Planning, so it's very not visible probably in these slides, but basically it's a project of 2 years. So we have started this September this year, and by 2026 in September. The measurement will start as from January, basically next year, and will take for 1 year long. And then at the end of this project, we'll also be able to prepare and to finalize the action design for the first offshore wind tender in Turkey, or the second. It's just a map that we have been created with some available information that we have been collecting during the first months of the project. So indeed, we have the 3 main concession sites, but yeah, we also have to consider, of course, that yeah, also at sea there are other users of the sea which, from environmental perspective, but also from other users like fisheries, military areas, navigation routes, port infrastructure. So all of this assessment, all of these constraints will have to be considered when we we finalized, let's say, the layout of the wind farm. We selected the site, the concession sites, and also where, for example, we let all the export cables and inter-array cables go into land. And this is, I think it's...
Thank you very much, Luca, for the presentation. Tabii bu ölçekte
Environmental and social impacts have to be managed well, considering the size of the project. In order to invest in such a big projects, we need to decrease the environmental and social risks. If we don't do so, it's not going to be sustainable. Now, I would like to leave the floor to Sibel Gülen, World Bank environmental specialist. Hi, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for your interest. I'm not going to say anything new, and I will be taking your attention to certain points that they already mentioned. Environmental and social aspects of offshore wind. It is important to consider them on time. These elements are important to us. But why? There are especially two elements that we should be careful about. The first one of which is to respect marine species and habitats. When we talk about the types, birds, bats, marine mammals, sea turtles, fish, shellfish, etc. Secondly, we need to consider the people who live and work by the sea, like fisheries and tourism. We need to consider these two important elements while proceeding. In the planning stage, we need to integrate these two important elements. And if we do so, then we will keep the projects on time, the costs will be down, we will get permission in an easier fashion, we will get the support of the public living in that area, and it is going to be easier to find financing opportunities. While defining the environmental and social limitations, we use three devices. We are doing strategic environmental and social assessment. The second one, marine spatial planning. These two studies are full-scale data collection projects. Today, I would like to underline the sensitivity mapping within the scope of ProBlue and used by the World Bank, which is called briefly as SunMap. While doing the mapping, we do have some stages. The first one is the collection of the desktop data, then stakeholder engagement. There might be some gaps in the desktop review, and if need be, we need to be filling data gaps with the field studies, and we need to be avoiding the impact as a result of the sensitivity mapping of biodiversity and social attributes, and we will define the location of the wind farm accordingly. In the roadmap, which was just mentioned, we can see such a workflow, and in this workflow, in the fields which were primarily evaluated from technical perspectives. Social and environmental limitations were also taken into consideration. I would like to attract your attention to these two important points. These red zones are to be exempted. We can't locate the wind farms in these red zones because they're high environmental and social risks and they can't be managed. Protection areas, nature protection areas, similarly. The yellow zones are the limited zones. When I say limited zones, it means that there are probable effects, but they can be managed to a certain extent. We need to be working on that. We need more detailed research in order to define it. And Marmara, in Marmara Sea, as you can also see, the red and yellow zones, environmental and social requirements have to be handled in a detailed fashion on top of the technical specifications. And when we have a look at this roadmap, there are some recommendations which are the following: develop marine spatial plan and ensure permitting incorporates environment and social impact assessment. Again, we need to publish a detailed guide on the permitting process, and we need to introduce health and safety requirements which are in line with the industry best practices. And also, we need to work on the training and skills assessments of Turkish workforce. These are 5 important recommendations for environmental and social aspects. In Marmara Sea, we need more detailed environmental and social studies. Within the scope of IPA, there is a sub-element which is the evaluation of the environmental and social constraints analysis. Within the scope of this study, there are 3 important tasks are going to be completed. As you can understand from the name, environmental and social constraints analysis is going to evaluate these factors, and it will identify high-risk factors and critical habitat evaluation and the definition of the critical habitat. It's a detailed definition. If you're interested in IFC and in EBRD documents, you can see the definition of the critical habitat. And it includes these 3 tasks, and we are giving them the consultancy services in that regard. We already started providing it. I didn't say anything new, I know, but I summarized about the social and environmental aspect of the matter. I hope it's helpful. Thank you very much, Sibel Hanım. And our contracting company, RPS'ten, experts are with us, and during coffee break, you can have a chance to discuss this matter with them. We discussed about the offshore wind farm potentials in Marmara Sea, and the things we listened to our panelists is that the technical and other requirements while preparing the roadmap, and it has many more aspects. And I hope that these discussions are going to be beneficial for our future steps. We're going to present a gift to our speakers, I guess, as far as I know. Thank you very much for the participants for your participation, and I hope that you benefited from this panel. Thank you very much.
I think these are some illustrations which exist in documents, and these are combined with the wind theme. I will give myself to my friend for a while to be paid.